What if everything you thought you knew about Christianity was wrong? For centuries, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, one of the most profound and controversial texts in Christian history, has been buried in silence. Why was it cast aside, erased from the scriptures, and hidden from the public eye? Was Mary Magdalene truly just a prostitute, as the Church told us? Or was she, in fact, one of the most significant figures in early Christianity? Could the Church's narrative of sin and redemption have deliberately silenced the women who were once at the heart of the faith? In this video, we will uncover the truth about Mary Magdalene and the gospel attributed to her. You'll discover how the ancient Christian world was not the uniform, male-dominated structure we've been taught, but a vibrant, diverse community full of mystical teachings, hidden revelations, and powerful women like Mary Magdalene. We'll dive into the reasons why her voice was silenced and how this gospel challenges everything we know about spiritual authority, gender, and the path to liberation. You'll see how the Gospel of Mary was not just a text, but a key to understanding early Christianity's untold history, a history that embraced women as spiritual leaders and acknowledged the divine knowledge within us all. This gospel speaks to us about personal revelation, the journey of the soul, and the power that still resonates today. So, why has this truth been suppressed for centuries? Why does Mary Magdalene remain one of the most misunderstood figures in religious history? And what does her story tell us about the nature of salvation, knowledge, and power? You'll be astonished by what you'll learn today, and once you hear the untold story, you might never see Christianity the same way again. Stay with us as we reveal these powerful truths. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe so you never miss a dive into hidden knowledge like this one. Let's begin. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, a groundbreaking revelation. In a world where power was often defined by control and conformity, where the divine truth was reserved for the few and the chosen, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene presents a radically different message. The Gospel of Mary does not seek to establish dominance, rather, it calls us to embrace the truth within, the revelation that lives in the depths of our own soul. For centuries, the Church and its leaders have perpetuated a narrative of salvation through suffering, redemption through penance, and power through submission. Mary Magdalene's story, however, defies all of these paradigms. She wasn't just a witness to the resurrection, she was a teacher, a visionary, and a guide who held within her the keys to spiritual awakening. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene is not a mere relic of a bygone era. It is a testament to a deeper truth that was silenced, buried beneath layers of patriarchal doctrine, waiting to resurface and reclaim its rightful place in the hearts of those seeking truth. This gospel, though fragmented and incomplete, speaks with a clarity that shakes the foundations of the traditional narrative. When Mary Magdalene speaks in the gospel, she is not merely recounting the past, she is offering a glimpse into a way of knowing, a way of being, that transcends the limitations imposed by external authority. Through the vision she shares in the text, we see that salvation is not found in external rituals or prescribed dogmas, but in the inner knowledge that comes through spiritual awakening. Imagine for a moment a time when the divine was not controlled by institutions, but was something that could be personally accessed through the quiet spaces of our own hearts and minds. This is the Christianity that Mary Magdalene knew. A faith not centered around power or fear, but one that valued wisdom, intuition, and personal experience. In the Gospel, Mary Magdalene offers the apostles a different perspective on Jesus' teachings, one that emphasizes inner revelation over external control. She shares a vision, a profound mystical encounter with the divine that challenges the very notion of sin as we know it. In her vision, sin is not a stain on the soul that must be cleansed through suffering and sacrifice. Instead, it is a product of ignorance, a lack of awareness of the divine truth that resides within each of us. This is a powerful message, one that speaks to the core of our human experience. It tells us that we are not flawed or broken beings in need of salvation from the outside, but divine beings who have simply forgotten who we are. We are not sinners in need of redemption. We are souls in need of remembrance. This understanding shifts the focus of spirituality from punishment to healing, from external salvation to internal awakening. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene teaches us that the path to spiritual liberation is not through suffering for our sins, but through remembering our divine nature. It encourages us to look within for the answers, to trust in our own ability to connect with the divine, and to recognize the wisdom that already resides within our hearts. This message is as radical today as it was when it was first shared. In a world that often seeks external validation and approval, the Gospel of Mary reminds us that true spiritual authority comes from within. It calls us to stop seeking permission to be who we truly are, and to instead trust in the divine guidance that we all carry. It is a message of empowerment, of reclaiming the sacred wisdom that has always been ours, even if it has been hidden from us for centuries. Think about how this perspective on sin and salvation can transform the way we approach our own spiritual journeys. Instead of feeling burdened by guilt or shame, we can approach our challenges with the understanding that they are opportunities for growth, not markers of our inherent flaw. In this light, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene offers us a path of healing and self-discovery, one that calls us to reclaim our inherent worth and divinity. Let's also consider the role of women in early Christianity and how the Gospel of Mary presents a radically different vision from what we've been taught. In the traditional Christian narrative, women were often sidelined, their voices suppressed or diminished. Yet, here we find Mary Magdalene, acknowledged by Jesus as a teacher, a leader, a guide, whose wisdom and spiritual authority are clear. In fact, the Gospel of Mary gives us a window into a world where women were seen as equal partners in the spiritual journey, where their wisdom was not just valued, but revered. This is an important reminder of the need to lift up the voices of women in all spiritual traditions. The suppression of Mary Magdalene's voice and the voices of other women like her has had a lasting impact on the way we understand spirituality and leadership. For centuries, women were excluded from positions of power in the church, their contributions erased from history. The Gospel of Mary calls us to reclaim this lost wisdom, to honor the feminine aspect of the divine that has always existed but has been hidden, ignored, or dismissed. In the Gospel, Mary Magdalene is not portrayed as a sinner or a victim. She is portrayed as a teacher, one who possesses wisdom and insight that the male apostles struggle to understand. This is a direct challenge to the patriarchal structures that have dominated religious thought for centuries. It is a reminder that true spiritual leadership is not about gender, but about the depth of one's connection to the divine, the clarity of one's vision, and the courage to speak truth, even when it challenges the status quo. When we reflect on the wisdom of Mary Magdalene, we are invited to consider the way we view leadership in our own lives. Are we willing to trust in our own inner wisdom, even when it goes against the grain? Are we open to hearing and learning from voices that have been silenced or dismissed? This is a powerful invitation, one that challenges us to redefine what it means to be a leader in our spiritual communities, our workplaces, and our homes. In addition to its spiritual teachings, the Gospel of Mary also offers profound insights into the nature of human suffering and the process of healing. In Mary's vision, the soul's journey through the hostile powers represents the internal struggles we all face as we move towards spiritual liberation. These powers, desire, ignorance, wrath, and pride, are not external forces, but internal obstacles that we must confront and overcome in order to awaken to our true nature. This understanding of suffering is incredibly healing. It frees us from the burden of seeing ourselves as victims of external forces and invites us to take responsibility for our own spiritual growth. It teaches us that the challenges we face are not signs of our inadequacy, but opportunities for us to rise above our fears, doubts, and attachments. In this way, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene offers us a path to healing that is both personal and transformative. As we explore the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and its message, we are invited to reclaim our own spiritual authority, to trust in our inner wisdom, and to recognize the divine truth that resides within each of us. The path of spiritual awakening is not about seeking external approval or validation, but about remembering who we truly are and aligning with the divine knowledge that is already ours. The healing power of this gospel is not just in its message, but in its ability to inspire us to live more authentically, to trust ourselves more deeply, and to embrace the divine wisdom that is available to all of us. It is a call to step into our own power, to reclaim our rightful place as spiritual beings, and to remember that we are not separate from the divine, but one with it. In the end, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene offers us a vision of Christianity that is inclusive, empowering, and healing. It invites us to reclaim the lost teachings of the early church and to rediscover the divine wisdom that has always been ours. It is a reminder that the divine truth is not found in external rituals or institutions, but in the quiet spaces of our own hearts, where we can connect with the divine and awaken to the truth of who we are. This journey is not just for Mary Magdalene. It is a journey for all of us. It is a call to remember our divinity, to trust in our own wisdom, and to step into our power as spiritual beings. It is a journey of healing, of awakening, and of reclaiming the truth that has been hidden from us for far too long. May the wisdom of Mary Magdalene guide us as we walk this path of awakening. The erasure of women in early Christianity, a struggle for power and truth. The story of Mary Magdalene is one of profound mystery and deep spiritual significance, yet it is also a tale of erasure, suppression, and the battle for power. When we examine the Gospel of Mary, we are not only confronted with the teachings of a woman who was once considered one of the most important figures in the early Christian community, but also with a history of how women were systematically removed from positions of spiritual authority. The Church's decision to marginalize women did not happen by accident. It was part of a broader effort to consolidate power, control the narrative, and ensure that certain voices, especially those of women, were silenced. Mary Magdalene's story is not just the story of an individual woman. It is the story of how women, throughout history, have had their voices erased from the spiritual narrative, their wisdom discarded and replaced with a narrative that serves to support the patriarchal structures of power. Her gospel, and the subsequent suppression of it, offers a glimpse into the complex relationship between gender, authority, and faith in the formation of Christianity. Mary Magdalene's role in the early church was not one of subordination, as later church leaders would have us believe. She was a teacher and a leader, someone who shared intimate teachings with Jesus, teachings that were not shared with others. This gospel, however, was not embraced by the institutional church that was beginning to form in the early centuries of Christianity. Why? Because Mary's role as a spiritual authority threatened the emerging power structures. Women like her were seen as too dangerous to be allowed a prominent place in the church's developing narrative. The erasure of women from the story of Christianity was not a subtle process. It was deliberate and systematic. The Church, in its effort to establish control over doctrine and practice, began to reshape the role of women in the faith. Women were removed from positions of leadership and authority, their voices suppressed, and their contributions minimized. This process reached its apex with the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when the Church solidified its doctrine and began to erase alternative Christian teachings, especially those that supported the idea of women as spiritual equals. It's important to recognize that this was not simply a theological shift, it was a power grab. The church leaders, primarily male, sought to control the message of Christianity, and in doing so they systematically excluded women from the conversation. By erasing the role of women like Mary Magdalene, they created a version of Christianity that served the needs of those in power. This version of the faith focused on hierarchy, submission, and the control of knowledge, qualities that could be easily enforced by an all-male clergy who held the keys to salvation. The implications of this exclusion are profound. It is not just about the loss of individual voices, it is about the suppression of an entire spiritual tradition. In the Gospel of Mary, we see a Christianity that values personal revelation, that sees the divine as something accessible to all people, not just a select few. We see a faith that embraces the idea that women can be spiritual leaders, that they can be teachers, prophets, and apostles in their own right. But this vision was buried, hidden beneath the weight of a growing institutional church that sought to solidify its power through the exclusion of those who did not fit its narrow definition of spiritual authority. This systemic erasure of women from the Christian story did not stop with Mary Magdalene. It continued throughout history, as the church codified its doctrines and established rigid gender roles that relegated women to the margins of religious life. Women were excluded from the priesthood, their spiritual authority questioned, and their contributions to the faith minimized or erased altogether. In many ways, the church became a tool of oppression for women, perpetuating the idea that spiritual authority was the exclusive domain of men. However, the Gospel of Mary, along with other Gnostic texts, offers a counter-narrative. These texts present a vision of Christianity that is radically different from the one that was eventually established as orthodoxy. In the Gnostic tradition, we find a Christianity that is inclusive, that recognizes the divine wisdom within all people, regardless of gender. In this vision, the voice of Mary Magdalene is not silenced, it is amplified. Her role as a teacher and spiritual authority is not diminished. It is celebrated. Her gospel offers us a glimpse into a Christianity where women were not just followers but leaders, not just supporters but active participants in the spiritual journey. When we look at the history of the church, it is clear that the exclusion of women was not an accident. It was a conscious decision made by those in power to ensure that their authority remained unchallenged. By silencing the voices of women like Mary Magdalene, the church was able to create a more centralized, hierarchical structure that was easier to control. But in doing so, it lost something profound, something that could have enriched the spiritual life of all believers. It lost the contributions of women, their wisdom, their insight, and their leadership. The message of the Gospel of Mary is not just a message of spiritual enlightenment. It is a message of resistance. It calls us to resist the forces that seek to silence marginalized voices, to resist the systems of power that seek to control knowledge and truth. It reminds us that the divine is not something that can be controlled or restricted to a select few. It is something that is accessible to all of us. We are all capable of receiving the wisdom of the divine, regardless of our gender, our status, or our place in society. This is not just a message for women. It is a message for all of us, regardless of gender or background. It is a call to reclaim our spiritual authority, to trust in our own ability to connect with the divine, and to resist the systems that seek to suppress that connection. It is a call to recognize the divine wisdom that resides within us all, and to honor the voices that have been silenced throughout history. As we reflect on the erasure of women in early Christianity, we are reminded of the importance of reclaiming these lost voices. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene offers us a glimpse into a Christianity that could have been, a faith that embraced the wisdom of women and valued personal revelation over institutional authority. It invites us to imagine what might have been if the voices of women had been allowed to flourish within the church. It challenges us to reconsider the way we view spiritual authority and to recognize that true leadership comes from within, not from external power structures. The suppression of women's voices in Christianity is not just a historical injustice. It is an ongoing issue. In many religious communities today, women continue to struggle for equal recognition and participation. The fight for gender equality in the church is far from over, and the story of Mary Magdalene serves as both a warning and an inspiration. It reminds us that the divine wisdom of women is not something that can be suppressed forever. It will eventually rise, just as Mary Magdalene's voice has risen again in the form of the gospel that bears her name. As we look to the future, we must continue the work of reclaiming the lost voices of women in Christianity and in all areas of life. We must resist the systems of power that seek to silence us, and instead embrace the wisdom and leadership that resides within us all. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene offers us a path forward, one that values personal revelation, spiritual equality, and the divine wisdom that flows through every human soul. In this way, the Gospel of Mary is not just a relic of the past. It is a living document, a guide for how we can transform our spiritual communities and our world. It calls us to recognize the divine in all people, to honor the wisdom of women, and to resist the forces that seek to suppress the truth. This is the message of Mary Magdalene, and it is a message that continues to speak powerfully to us today. As we move forward, let us remember that the path of spiritual liberation is one that we must all walk together. It is a path that values each person's unique contribution, each person's wisdom, and each person's connection to the divine. In doing so, we can begin to heal the wounds of the past and create a future where all voices are heard and all people are empowered to share their wisdom with the world. And so, the story of Mary Magdalene is not just a story of the past. It is a story for the present and the future. It is a call to reclaim the lost wisdom of women, to resist the forces of suppression, and to embrace the spiritual equality that is our birthright. Mary Magdalene, from sinner to spiritual authority, the transformation of a soul. The transformation of Mary Magdalene from a figure labeled as a sinful woman to one of the most revered spiritual authorities in early Christianity is a journey that speaks to the heart of what it means to reclaim one's divine authority. For centuries, Mary was misrepresented, not only in Scripture, but also in the collective consciousness of Christian society. From a trusted teacher and prophet, her image was twisted into that of a fallen woman, a repentant sinner, creating an enduring narrative that served the agenda of those in power. But beneath this imposed image lies the true story of Mary, the woman who carried within her the deepest wisdom, the knowledge of Christ's teachings that was passed directly to her. She wasn't simply a follower. She was a leader, a guide, and one of the earliest witnesses to the resurrection. Her role was pivotal. Her spiritual insight was profound. Yet, the establishment of orthodoxy, the very foundation of today's dominant Christian narrative, sought to suppress such revelations, especially when they threatened to upend established power dynamics, particularly around the role of women in spiritual leadership. In the Gospel of Mary, we encounter a Mary who is not a sinner, but a teacher, a woman whose voice was powerful enough to challenge even the male apostles. And yet her voice was largely erased from the narrative. How did this happen? What caused this drastic shift from spiritual authority to the stigma of sin? This story is not just Mary Magdalene's, it is the story of how society often silences those who threaten its structures, especially when they are women. The role of women in early Christianity, especially those like Mary Magdalene, is a complex and often painful history. Mary's transformation into a sinner didn't occur through her actions, but through the church's need to control the story, to fit it into a male-dominated narrative that saw women as subordinate. By casting Mary Magdalene as a fallen woman, someone who needed saving, the church was able to push her away from the powerful role she had held, erasing the threat she posed to the patriarchal structure they were building. It wasn't Mary who was the sinner. It was the distortion of her story that was the true sin. This process of transformation wasn't unique to Mary. It was part of a larger narrative in which the early church, as it solidified its power, erased the stories of women, their contributions, and their leadership roles in favor of a narrative that could be more easily controlled. The gospel narratives we are familiar with, the ones that form the basis of the Christian faith today, were selectively edited, with many of the texts that promoted female leadership and spiritual equality being discarded as heretical. These texts, the Gnostic Gospels, like the Gospel of Mary, emphasize the roles of women not just as followers, but as spiritual equals and even leaders. But these ideas were a direct threat to the hierarchy the early church was creating, and so they were silenced. But why does this matter today? Why does the truth of Mary Magdalene and the other women whose voices were erased matter to us now? The answer lies in the very nature of what Christianity was meant to be, a faith of love, equality, and transformation. The story of Mary Magdalene speaks to our inherent worth and the recognition of our divine nature. It speaks to a Christianity that values inner revelation, that sees each soul as capable of receiving divine wisdom regardless of gender or status. And this message, this forgotten message, needs to be reclaimed today, not only for women, but for all of humanity. When we look at Mary Magdalene's true role in Christianity, we see that her transformation, from a leader to a sinner, and then back to a revered teacher, reflects the struggles we face today in reclaiming lost wisdom and voices. Just as Mary's voice was suppressed, so too are the voices of many marginalized communities still silenced today. The suppression of women's spiritual authority in early Christianity is not a relic of the past. It is a living issue, as many women and marginalized groups continue to fight for equal representation, equality, and the opportunity to lead in spiritual communities. This history of erasure is not only a reflection of the injustices in the past, but a call to action for the present. By rediscovering Mary Magdalene's true role and her teachings, we can begin to imagine a Christianity that embraces the wisdom of all its members, where the voices of women, the oppressed, and the marginalized are not only heard, but celebrated. The Gospel of Mary offers us a path forward, one that values spiritual equality, the recognition of divine wisdom within all of us, and the empowerment of those who have been silenced. In a world that is still grappling with issues of gender inequality, religious authority, and the suppression of truth, the story of Mary Magdalene and her spiritual transformation speaks to the heart of our struggles. Her journey is a reminder that spiritual authority is not given by institutions, but comes from within, from a deep connection with the divine and a willingness to share that wisdom with others. It is a reminder that the divine truth is not something that can be controlled or suppressed, but is something that exists within each of us, waiting to be awakened. The Gospel of Mary calls us to remember that the path to spiritual awakening is not one that requires submission to external authorities or rigid doctrines, but one that is personal and transformative. It reminds us that the divine is not distant or removed from us, but is within us, guiding us, helping us to remember who we truly are. Mary Magdalene's teachings, as found in the Gospel, show us that true salvation comes not through external acts of penance, but through inner transformation, through remembering our divine nature and embracing the truth that resides within us. Just as Mary Magdalene embraced the wisdom she received directly from Jesus, we are called to embrace the divine wisdom within ourselves. We must trust in our own inner knowing our ability to connect with the divine, and our right to lead with the spiritual authority that comes from our connection to God. We are all capable of receiving the wisdom of the divine, just as Mary did. Her story is a reminder of our own inherent power, of the divine spark that exists within each of us. The lesson here is not just about the historical silencing of Mary Magdalene or the exclusion of women from positions of power in the church. It is about recognizing the divine authority that each of us holds within. Mary Magdalene's transformation from sinner to teacher, from follower to spiritual leader, is a reflection of the spiritual journey we all undertake, a journey of awakening, remembering, and reclaiming our divine wisdom. As we reflect on her story, we must ask ourselves, how are we silencing the voices of others in our own lives? Where are we still allowing oppressive systems of power to dictate who is worthy of spiritual authority and who is not? How can we, as individuals and as a society, begin to embrace the wisdom and leadership of all people, regardless of gender, race, or background? Mary's story is one of reclaiming power, spiritual authority, and wisdom. It is a story of transformation, of awakening to the truth that has always been inside us. Her journey speaks to us today, as we too seek to reclaim our spiritual power and step into the leadership roles we were meant to occupy. By embracing the teachings of the Gospel of Mary, we can begin to create a world where all voices are heard, where spiritual authority is recognized in all its forms, and where the divine wisdom that resides in each of us is honored and celebrated. Mary Magdalene's story does not end with her suppression. It is a story of resurrection. Just as she witnessed the resurrection of Jesus, so too do we witness the resurrection of her voice, her teachings, and her wisdom. Her legacy lives on, not in the shadow of what was suppressed, but in the light of what is now being reclaimed. In reclaiming Mary Magdalene's true role in the story of Christianity, we are not only restoring her voice, we are restoring the truth of who we are and the divine wisdom that resides within us all. This is a message of empowerment, healing, and transformation. It is a call to each of us to embrace our spiritual authority, to trust in our divine wisdom, and to lead from a place of love, equality, and truth. As we walk the path of spiritual awakening, may we remember Mary Magdalene's journey and the wisdom she shared. May we remember that the path to divine truth is not found in submission or external authority, but in the awakening of our own inner wisdom. It is a path that leads us back to ourselves, back to the divine spark that resides within each of us, waiting to be recognized and embraced. As we reach the end of our exploration of Mary Magdalene and her profound impact on the early Christian world, I can't help but feel a deep sense of reverence for the journey we've just taken together. Her story, though buried for centuries, continues to echo through time, reminding us that our understanding of faith, power, and spirituality is far richer and more complex than we have been led to believe. Mary Magdalene's Gospel is not merely a document from the past. It is a living testament to the strength and wisdom that has always existed within us. It shows us that divine truth is not reserved for the powerful or the privileged, but is something that belongs to all people, regardless of their status or their gender. Her story calls us to honor and embrace the feminine aspects of spirituality, to recognize that wisdom and leadership come from within, and to understand that personal revelation holds the same sacred value as institutional doctrine. It is important for us to reclaim the true story of Mary Magdalene, not just for the sake of history, but for our own spiritual growth. The path she walked is a path of healing, of remembering who we truly are, and of stepping into the spiritual authority that is already ours. Her gospel challenges us to question the systems of power that seek to control our spiritual lives and invites us to trust in our own inner wisdom and connection with the divine. As we reflect on the lessons of Mary Magdalene, we must ask ourselves, What if we were to embrace our own spiritual authority in the way she did? What if we trusted in our ability to receive divine wisdom, not through the lens of external authority, but through the quiet whispers of our own hearts? What if we believed that we too are capable of leading with love, compassion, and insight? The divine truth that Mary Magdalene discovered is not something distant or inaccessible. It is a part of us, waiting to be remembered and awakened. This journey we've undertaken today is not just an intellectual exercise. It is a call to action, a call to reclaim the power of women in spiritual communities, a call to embrace the divine wisdom within all of us, a call to resist the forces of suppression and control, and to instead honor the sacred light that shines within every soul. Mary Magdalene's story reminds us that spirituality is not about conforming to a set of rules, but about remembering who we are in relation to the divine and walking that path with grace, courage, and humility. If this video has touched your heart, if it has given you insight, or if it has inspired you to think more deeply about the role of women in the history of Christianity and the spiritual authority that we all carry, I invite you to support this channel. Your support is not just about helping me create more videos. It's about sending out a wave of energy, love, and light into the world so that more people can awaken to the truth of who they are and the divine wisdom within them. Your like, comment, and subscription are more than just actions. They are acts of support for a movement of awakening and transformation. Every small contribution, whether it's a simple like or a thoughtful comment, is invaluable. It helps me continue to create content that uplifts and inspires, and it strengthens our collective journey toward truth and healing. As we close today's exploration, remember that Mary Magdalene's story is not just hers, it is all of ours. It is a reminder that no matter who we are or where we come from, we all have access to divine wisdom, and we all have the power to transform our lives and the world around us. Her story calls us to be fearless in our quest for truth, to trust in our inner voice, and to stand in our own spiritual authority. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you feel moved, share this message with others. Let's spread the truth of Mary Magdalene's story far and wide so that the world may heal and awaken. Together, we can reclaim the wisdom that has been hidden for far too long, and create a world where all voices are heard and all people are empowered to step into their divine truth. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of this community. Your support means the world to me, and together we will continue to shine light on the truths that have been forgotten so that they can guide us toward a brighter, more inclusive future. May the wisdom of Mary Magdalene continue to inspire and heal us all.